Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Really glad to talk to you about tZERO again. We'll catch up on what we've been up to in the last week and a half, as well as give a preview into our strategic priorities and where we would like to go in the future. Last time I spoke, we talked about how tZERO is going to be recommitting itself to its core values and core vision. The first item of that, of course, is being digital first in all we do in the financial markets. The other elements reinforce execution of that vision. That's speed, results, innovation, transparency, and community. I'll talk about how our strategic priorities link back to our core vision and values as we execute and win. The first priority is around strategic partnerships and relationships. In this ecosystem, no one can do it alone. An approach that is autarkic in nature and is closed loop misses opportunities for partnership and collaboration that feed the supply, demand, / liquidity and infrastructure parts of our business in the way that is hard to replicate in a different strategy. So our core focus is attracting on best of breed partners in these areas. Again, whether it's supply, whether it's demand and liquidity, I'll talk about that in a second, and whether it's infrastructure, particularly outside of the United States. Last week, we talked about a new partnership with Alpha Ledger, and we look forward to working with Manish Dutta and his team to deliver new assets to our private platform when we talked about a few private fund type products that we would be bringing to our platform, as well as, importantly, pursuing advocacy and product solutions for public markets. If you remember, tZERO's genesis came from ideation for blockchain solutions in public equities markets. That conversation has been difficult in the last few years because of politics and regulation, but of course, tone and substance has changed. And so we'll look forward to engaging with Alpha Ledger and others to advance that dialogue. Historically, tZERO focused on tokenized securities infrastructure in the US, and we've built an excellent regulatory stack for broker-dealer-led end-to-end support for tokenized securities in the US, from capital raising to trading, and our trading platform, by a number of metrics, leads among US tokenized securities ATSs, too importantly, custody. And as a special purpose broker-dealer, we can maintain our wallets and custody tokenized securities ourselves without having to send them to an external good control location. Those all have been significant achievements and parts of our build, but we need to diversify. And we need to diversify while keeping our focus on being digital in all we do and really developing excellent, defined, easy to understand product silos. I'll make a couple of observations on that. You cannot develop supply, you cannot develop assets without looking at demand and liquidity. And demand and liquidity means a couple of things. It means generating native demand on the platform. It also means attracting professional liquidity providers, whether they are market makers the way you might think about them traditionally, or whether they play other roles that can, coupled with native demand, provide that part of the marketplace. That is going to be a significant priority for us on our partnership agenda. Likewise, we cannot be digital while ignoring other digital asset types. You saw the announcement last week about us applying for DCO, DCM licenses in the US with the CFTC, and I'll talk a little bit more about that now, how that feeds into our multi-asset strategy. But it's, of course, is also an opportunity for us to innovate with tokenized derivatives and other products that fall under that regulated space. It relates to a crypto strategy as well, that and potentially predictive markets that I'll get to in a second. With respect to infrastructure, digital assets by design are 24/7 and global. There is renewed conversation among politicians and regulators about convergence, about laws coming together globally to provide seamless issuance of capital, trading of capital, settlement of capital, and all the other functions across borders with very little friction. The reality is that laws have been and are still really fragmented, balkanized, and while there are wonderful initiatives, including the US-UK initiatives we've heard about in the last few weeks, the reality is likely to be for the foreseeable future that borders will still have meetings. And so for us as technology innovators, it is important to achieve with financial assets what internet did to data and voice. Again, we applaud the sandboxes and other initiatives that are happening at a regulatory level, but we believe that private infrastructure rails should lead. And to take our leading, I think, best of breed broker-dealer-led ecosystem for tokenized securities in the US and partner it with similarly minded and similarly accomplished infrastructure providers in other regions, Europe and Asia in particular, would allow us to stitch sort of a follow the sun infrastructure belt and global rails that would advance the vision of digital assets as 24/7 and global. We believe the right next step for that vision is one of partnership as opposed to organic build for a bunch of reasons. And again, while future may be self-regulating and the technology may play increasingly greater role, and I'll touch on that in a minute, and there's certainly political support for that, including with the SEC in the US, we think institutional participants in particular will still require regulated infrastructure that is best of breed and that potentially has a global follow the sun footprint to it. So that's going to be another piece of strategic relationship priority. Likewise, we cannot over rely on regulated assets and regulated market footprint, particularly as technology is moving to a future state. And again, if we get back to the basics for why we're all excited about blockchain technology and smart contract automation, and that is has reduced level of intermediation, increased level of peer-to-peer interaction, and self-regulate of technology. And so as we do that, we also want to get closer to a range of technology providers in the space, particularly layer one and layer two providers. We are not going to handicap the odds in protocol wars. I think that that issue is going to sort itself out, but we are going to get closer to a number of participants in this space. I think it is going to have strategic and commercial impact on tZERO as those relationships feed the flywheel, as I mentioned before, on the supply and demand side of our marketplace. That's not to say that we are not going to develop our own layer two technology. We've talked about tZERO chain before. I still continue to believe that it is important for a number of reasons. It's important to, as I mentioned, to diversify our potential over-reliance on regulated infrastructure. It is another way for us to go global. If people are using our technology to tokenize real-world assets and other priorities globally, that is a plus. It is a way for us to be more in the center of RWA tokenization narrative. It is a way for us to potentially have additional acquisition and investment currency that can further fuel our growth. And of course, for tZERO to continue to position itself as a leading, not just a financial service company, but a leading fintech as well. And so both of those priorities will continue, but that does not preclude a partnership vector with other technology providers. And as I said, lastly, I think our history was innovation in the public markets. We believe that's where a massive opportunity set lies. We're committed to private markets. We're committed to real world asset tokenization. But I think it's hard to gain secular scale and relevance without applying what we're learning in the private markets to the public markets. And we're going to recommit ourselves to that vision. I think our partnership with Alpha Ledger and the advocacy and product ideation that is going to come out of that is an element of that. The next strategic priority is supply and demand. Again, I mentioned our Alpha Ledger partnership is going to is going to help to fuel that. And the partnerships will feed the flywheel for supply and demand. I talked about the demand and liquidity priorities and how we need to consciously develop that for the marketplace. We also want to be connective tissue in the digital asset ecosystem, at least in the US to begin with, and we have some assets that other participants in the brokerage space don't for now, although rules will continue to change and evolve. That's particularly custody, and we've been approved for correspondent custody for digital assets over the last couple of months, and we look forward to driving the supply and demand dynamic on our marketplace with work with other broker dealers and through easy API connectivity and other relationships. As we look at asset verticals generally, we have to be more focused. We have to be focused on assets that are easy to understand and are attractive, including to the digital native crowd. Obviously, real world assets are a core part of that, and within that, real estate. And we look forward to focusing on that, including on the partnership side. That's not to exclude other opportunities in the more traditional security space, particularly for late stage private companies, where we will continue to work with a range of partners to unlock liquidity for those asset types. Our patents, our intellectual property, likewise, can be a contributor to the supply and demand flywheel, particularly as we look to our patents as a sort of product ideation in private and, importantly, public markets, where a lot of those ideas came from. Of course, we'll continue to evaluate opportunities for our patents to be used to ensure that other market participants are not violating them, but it's equally important to use them for product ideation and strategic growth. The next strategic priority is around user experience as we move towards a multi-asset platform. As assets become truly technologically interoperable, we want to deliver experience that is cross and multi-asset. And there are a couple of ways for how we're going to do that. First, we are going to be looking to deliver longer trading hours, order entry, order matching, and order execution. As I mentioned before, digital assets, whether it's crypto or we believe all types of tokenized assets are meant to be 24/7 and global. And we will be in the near term expanding the footprint of our platform to be more in line with that objective. Likewise, as I mentioned, you cannot be truly digital while ignoring other digital asset types. So a couple of observations on that. People need to be able to use digital assets to fund their brokerage accounts at tZERO. While the regulatory picture is catching up, and I'll touch on that, we will be introducing a crypto paywall in the fourth quarter. Of our multi and cross asset environment, we are going to be introducing or reintroducing a crypto offering. As we're looking at regulatory reform, there are different pathways we can take to that product. Of course, we have our broker-dealer footprint, including digital asset custody, and in view of recent direction from the SEC, we're working with the regulators to be permitted to offer those types of assets through our broker-dealer platform. That is an ongoing conversation. In parallel, you saw that we applied for DCO, DCM licenses from CFTC. One of the reasons for that is as regulatory reform works its way through Congress, CFTC entities might have primary jurisdiction over crypto, and that's one reason why we have them, not the only reason, and I'll touch on that. And in parallel, we're exploring other ways for how we can rent money transmission licenses temporarily while those longer-term regulatory reform initiatives play out to support a digital asset platform and to replace the licenses that we've had in the past. DCO, DCM, as I mentioned, other than crypto optionality, will also support other initiatives, including around tokenized derivatives, including around predictive markets, and to really deliver on the path of having a more cross-asset experience. As we look at other asset types, whether subscribing to other private trading venues to give access to securities that trade there on our platform, whether it's public securities, whether it's other activities, we'll be evaluating how we deploy that. Of course, that all needs to get deployed and framed around our tokenized securities platform, which is the core of who we are for now. And obviously, the puck is going to keep going in the direction. But the focus again on the priorities I mentioned before about strategic partnerships and supply demand, feeding our tokenized security platform, and around that, building a multi-asset offering is absolutely important. I think in terms of technology supporting that, a native app is critical, and we're working on that. Website and our web interface, likewise, are going to be reformed and improved. And I'll talk to you about timeline for that, as well as our overall technology reexamination in the coming periods. The other strategic priorities, really quickly, transparency and engagement. We've talked about that last time. Engagement on social media, engagement through regular PR updates, engagement through industry leadership, engagement through public policy advocacy to immunize this industry from future changes in the political direction and regulatory agency leadership through durable legislation that's passed in Congress is really important to us. Lastly, I'll talk about growth optionality. It's sort of a vague term, but what I mean by that is we want tZERO to win, and we want all of our stakeholders, investors, tZERO holders, our business partners to win in this fast-moving space that's having a lot of tailwinds now, politically and commercially. And if structural changes, including our public market presence, help to advance those growth strategies, our investors, our board, and our management are of course evaluating them and how they can be deployed in the way that advances our growth, because that's our objective number one. I look forward to talking to you more in the coming periods. As I mentioned, we're going to be evaluating how to make these updates more informative, more interactive, introduce you to the broader tZERO community, our team, our partners, and we'll be communicating new formats. I think in this coming week, you will see more announcements as we continue to enroll initiatives and partnerships on the supply, demand, and infrastructure sides. And I look forward to recapping you